Hey y'all, today we're back with some more lessons you can learn from Critical Role, elements you can steal from Matt Mercer. As a quick disclaimer, just as before, don't compare yourself to Matt Mercer or any of the amazing DMs online, or to any of your own DMs. It's a recipe for disaster. I don't want you to beat yourself up. I think of it like this. Every time you see a good DM, you have the opportunity to take some elements that you can incorporate into your own games. You're not stealing their intellectual property or anything. You're simply finding the styles, the little nuances that work for you. I have found 3 more elements that might help you in your DM journey. First things first, this is a very small thing, but it's a very powerful thing. In combat, Matt is very clear about positioning. He always makes sure to ask his players after they've decided to do something. If they didn't move already, or even if they did and they didn't use up all their speed, he'll ask them if the player is gonna stay put or if they're gonna move anywhere else. This just takes 1 second or maybe 2, but it can alleviate a lot of issues. There have been plenty of times where I've been playing and maybe I was caught up in the heat of the moment. Maybe there was something a little more complex that I wanted to execute, in which case I was focused on that. And then when it actually came down to positioning, I usually won't realize until maybe the enemy's turn. And then I realize, oh crap, I was so focused on that one moment that I left my character hanging right there. Not that you have to use up all your movement or any of your movement every turn, but Matt Mercer always makes sure to give his players the opportunity to say, yep, I'm staying there, or no, let me move over there. So you don't have to deal with those issues, those moments of regret. That's something that as a DM you can check in with, so that your players will always have their positioning in mind, or at the very least, they'll have the opportunity to. Next, it's something that is, again, just takes another second or 2. Something that Matt does that I love is that he will call out whose turn it is and also say who's on deck, who's coming up after this person. And that's magnificent, because if you have a lot of players, potentially a lot of enemies, if the turns are taking long, a player might get caught up in reading their sheet, reviewing some notes that may be pertinent in this combat or maybe the next encounter, and wants to be ready for it when we hit that player's turn. We don't want them to be caught like a deer in the headlights. So the technique of saying who's on deck allows you to give that player a little warning, a little heads up, so that if they were looking back through their notes, then they have a chance to immediately snap back in, so they'll be ready by the time it gets to their turn. Matt does this masterfully. He does this in such a quick, fluid way that it doesn't detract from the action. It makes it flow even better. And the first couple times you do this, it might be a little jarring, especially if you haven't done it before. The more you do it, the more you get used to it, the more it becomes second nature, and the easier it'll be. Finally, I want to talk about how Matt deals with misses. There are some cases where it's fairly quick, especially if the player has more they want to do that turn. Let's say the character has the ability to action surge, in which case they might miss and then decide to action surge, in which case Matt will gloss over the miss very quickly, will pass over very quickly. But oftentimes he will give it a little extra flair. He'll describe it in different ways, saying, you have a character who's swinging out with the sword and he misses. Sometimes it's the swing of the blade that maybe goes a little wide. Maybe the enemy ducks. Or, in some cases, the enemy, to establish this character, this NPC, this potential enemy's combat prowess, he describes the miss as being a situation where this combatant moves forward, sees your blow coming and parries it with ease. And this description of a miss allows you as a DM to paint a much more vivid picture of this enemy, potentially giving your players a clue or two as to maybe how experienced, how trained this enemy is, or maybe how reliant on brute force and strength they are. Like what I picture with the parrying is you have a very seasoned veteran of combat, and as such, that miss is a matter of this combatant being able to predict the move. And that's why it's like their overall combat ability is what makes their armor class, the difficulty to hit them, so high. Whereas, say you're going against a very heavily armored creature, maybe something with an exoskeleton that's difficult to pierce through, instead of that blade whiffing completely, it could be a matter of the blade not having enough force to penetrate. And so you describe the blade bouncing off the carapace, dealing no significant damage to the creature. So those were 3 more elements that you can steal from Matt Mercer and use to enhance your own D&D game. I hope this was helpful. If you liked this, please like it. If you have any questions or any suggestions for future topics, please leave a comment. If you want more content like this, subscribe. But until next time, take care.